Hi, I'm Candace Hunter from the Practical Herbalist, and today I'm excited to talk about one of my favorite herbal cleansers, Four Thieves. No, it's not the Four Thieves that you have seen in all the ads for essential oil companies. That's actually a blend, and they're calling it Four Thieves, and that's great, but the actual real Four Thieves cleanser would have been more likely a vinegar-based solution, because that's what was available back in medieval Europe. At the time that the plagues were happening, depending on which king and which queen and which person was in charge that you're looking at in any given year, because there was so much shuffling of who was in charge and who was running each kingdom or each country, which were semi-countries. Let's not even get into the history in that way. You had times where alchemy was supported and times where it was completely outlawed. And even when it was supported, alchemy was for the really wealthy, because it required an awful lot of resources to be able to create essential oils and to create distilled spirits. Distillation was not a cheap thing back then. Those were very, very expensive things. So the chances are pretty good that the original Four Thieves who created this blend didn't use essential oils. They would have used a vinegar, because that was common. And that was the easiest and most common way that people made herbal extracts and cleansers. Exactly which of the plants they used, that's also debatable. We don't really know. We believe the Four Thieves of the fame, of Four Thieves vinegar fame, came from probably England. So probably they used plants that were easy to get there. And that is the basis of the blend that we're talking about today, which was developed by our wonderful herbalist friend, Sierralupe. She developed this blend with the idea of what would actual real English people of the time have had access to easily. And the recipe that we have on the Practical Herbalist reflects that. In the recipe, the way that she wrote it, she's talking about, she really coaches you on using fresh plants. You can use dried plants too. And if you're going to use fresh plants or if you're going to use dried plants, it's kind of the same thing. If you're using dried plants, you can probably add a little more vinegar than you would if you're using fresh plants. But either way, it's kind of the same practice. What I wanted to do today was show you a little bit of how to modify this recipe, her recipe, to use some fresh and some dried plants, because sometimes we've got access to all four plants in one form or the other, but sometimes we've run out of the dried version of one or more of them, like I did. So I decided I'd take a quick clip of it and show you what that looks like when you're working with plants that are some fresh and some dry. So it's like this.
Today we're going to make Sierralupe's version of Four Thieves vinegar. We're going to use a combination of dried and fresh ingredients, and that's part of what I wanted to show you about this today. The first ingredient we're going to use is lavender flowers. I'm using a half part only because that's what I had in my household. It's okay to modify the recipe as needed based on what's available to you. These lavender flowers are English lavender, so it's a lavandula angustifolia. Any lavender truly will do. These are the ones that I'm using in part because I had them, but also in part because they're also culinary. And the version of Sue's oil that I want to make today is going to be useful for both culinary or for cleaning purposes. So first we'll dump those in. And the recipe she's written is all in parts, which means you just worry about volume and rough parts. You don't have to worry about having everything be exactly the same weight. The second one I'm going to be using here is rosemary, rosmarinus, and these particular rosemary leaves or parts actually came from Sue's yard, so that's pretty kind of cool. Anyway, rosemary, rosmarinus is a antifungal, antimicrobial. It's also culinary, so there you go. And put those in. Okay. And that one, those were both dried. And then this one is also dried. This one is mugwort, Artemisia vulgaris. And it's the common mugwort. Whatever mugwort is living or growing near you is in all likelihood going to work as well. Artemisia vulgaris is one that does grow in my area. This one I happened to purchase from an herbalist, or an herb shop. So we'll put that in there. Artemisia vulgaris is the same plant that is used for making moxa. So if you're familiar with moxa in Chinese medicine, if you've ever had a moxa treatment, that's the herb they're using. So the last one for me was sage, and that one is a Salvia officinalis. That one is the one that is dry, or not dried for me. Because I didn't have any more dried in the house, it's late summer and I haven't gotten to drying more yet. Our sage in our yard tends to grow year round, so I often don't dry it. I just go out and grab some when I need it, even in the middle of winter. So what I did was I got a big handful of sage that once cut up is a generous 1 part. The sage leaves that we have here, it's the drought season and this plant hasn't been watered, so they're fairly dry. I could maybe have gone twice as much if I really wanted to, but I thought this would work well for what I'm doing today. So you can let your sage wilt if you want, since we're using it with a vinegar, and if it's a drier environment like mine is, I wouldn't worry about that. So once we get all of our herbs in there, you can see we're filling approximately half of the container. Hopefully I've got that where you can see it. I always forget the angle of the camera. So there's your container. The herbs are in there. I have a very generous 2 cups. It's actually probably more like 2 1/4 cups. So rather than 500 milliliters, it's probably more like 525 milliliters of apple cider vinegar. And the apple cider vinegar that I'm using today is one that is organic, raw, with the mother in. And I just poured the rest of what I had into my jar, or into my cup. And I may very well top this off with a little bit more later when I buy more. If not, that'll be fine. You'll notice there's about equal parts of vinegar at the bottom as there is for plant material in the top. So we're gonna give this a good shake, and every day go and shake your Four Thieves, shake them up, and then in about 4 weeks we will strain it, or you can strain it and use it.
All right, so you saw how easy that was, right? The amount of sage that I had to use to bulk it up or whatever was 1.5 to 2 times what I would have used if I was just using the dried sage. So sage is kind of fluffy when it's dried, so it's, But anyway, that gives you an idea of how to modify the recipe to fit what is available for you. So when you've finished letting it, put it in there, let it steep, let it stand for, I think it's like a month, and then strain it out. And once you've got it, what do you do with it, right? That's the big question. I mean, obviously you can add it to your mop water. I mean, if I'm mopping a kitchen floor, I may add about a cup of the Four Thieves vinegar to the entire bucket of mop water for the mopping. If I am making up a sprayer that I'm going to use for spraying my countertops, I'll use about half of the sprayer will be Four Thieves, the other half will be water, because the vinegar will still be strong enough and the herbs will definitely be strong enough to kill off all manner of nastiness. If you're going to be using it for external use, like topical use, you can use it straight up just as it is. I have, especially when I know that cold and flu are knocking on my door, I have used Four Thieves as my hair wash, vinegar wash or rinse. I have also used Four Thieves when I've had rashes, like especially if I'm rubbing my hand as if it's my hand, but no, my foot, if I have like to deal with any kind of potential athlete's foot or anything like that, I might decide to use Four Thieves as the final rinse for when I'm washing my feet, or I might do a vinegar soak, foot soak with it. I've also done hand soaks with Four Thieves vinegar as well as other vinegars to soften my skin, but also to take in some of those herbal properties, particularly, again, if I've encountered illness, if someone in the family's ill, I'm more likely to do that. You can also take Four Thieves internally with the mugwort. You want to be a little bit careful of that. If you are pregnant, I wouldn't recommend it. And I probably wouldn't recommend it if you're breastfeeding. But for the rest of us, it's not likely to be harmful. I go a little bit light with mugwort internal use. myself, but folks like Katja and Rin at the Commonwealth School of Holistic Herbalism definitely advocate using it internally. So I don't think that you need to worry too much about that, but either way, I'd go kind of light. I might include it as part of the vinegar in my salad dressing, for instance. Or I might, if I know, again, cold and flu have been about, I might take a teaspoon and add it to my tea or an herbal tea. I might consider adding a couple of tablespoons to, maybe 3 tablespoons to a soup that I'm making or stew that I'm making for the family, just to help bolster up our immune systems and fight off any crud that might be lurking about. So that's Four Thieves Vinegar. It's really easy to make, and Sierralupe's blend is really a very effective one. I recommend it.
If you like this video, get more by joining the Herbal Nerd Society. You'll get custom articles and videos each month, plus you'll be supporting The Practical Herbalist and Real Herbalism Radio. Click the join button at The Practical Herbalist to join the Herbal Nerd Society today.